Thank you to DeleteMe for sponsoring today's video. All right, on December 31st, 4 Houthi small boats came out of Yemen to within 20 meters of a Maersk container ship and then fired on said ship with crew-served weapons and small arms before attempting to board the container ship. Well, the container ship sent out a distress call that was answered by the Dwight D Eisenhower strike group that responded to small boats like this shooting at a civilian container ship. Well, once on the scene, the American helicopters issued verbal warnings to the Houthi boats. The Houthi boats then decided to take their small arms and their crew-served weapons, aim them at the American helicopters, and pop off a couple rounds. And that's when they knew they have fucked up, because there's standing orders and there's rules of engagement in the United States Navy, one of which says, if you fire on us, we can defend ourselves until you no longer are a threat. And that's when the crew chief got on the 50 here and put it in rock and roll mode and proceeded to delete 10 Houthi sailors from existence, sinking 3 of the 4 small boats, only allowing the 4th boat to escape to tell the tale in Yemen of what happened this day. The same way I want you to delete your online personal identifiable information. Your personal information is all over the internet. From signing up to news sites to every social media app out there, some part of your account is being sold to data brokers. Data brokers are companies that hoover up as much information as they can about everyone's public records, or they purchase your information from companies like Meta and Alphabet. This mass data collection is then sorted into packets and sold on mass sites like these. So why is this important to you? This information has been used to screen job candidates illegally. In 2012, Spokio paid $800,000 to settle an FTC lawsuit for allegedly violating the Fair Credit Reporting Act because of companies were gathering personal information about their employees and job applicants illegally. There's very strict rules about how that works. DeleteMe, like this, is a hands-free service that will remove your information that's being sold online to these knuckleheads. DeleteMe experts remove your data from data brokers all year long, including your personal information like your telephone number and your address. You will be provided a report within 7 days, like this one, and DeleteMe will continue to monitor the sites all year long and repeat removals as necessary. I use DeleteMe to protect my information, and you should too. Use my link in the description or use code subbrief20 to save 20% on your order. Let's go. All right, head over to the United States over here. We're going to talk about money because we got the numbers, boys. We got the numbers for 2024 shipbuilding plan and the budget for the United States Navy. So the big budget, the total cost of the U.S. Navy for this year, 2024, is going to be $245 billion. Of that 245, we're going to spend 34 billion with a B on shipbuilding. So let's take a look at how this breaks down. Every year, whenever the Navy testifies before Congress, they give them 3 choices. They call them alternatives 1, 2, and 3. Alternative 1 is the easiest. It is the simplest. It is the focus on surface combatants like the frigates and the destroyers. Of course, we're going to have like eventually seven aircraft carriers. And that's alternative 1. It's the cheapest, it's the easiest to do, and it's the most likely to get approved, in my opinion, by the way. This is all opinion here. Alternative 2 is my favorite, is that's the same plan as far as the carriers and everything goes, but fewer destroyers and frigates and more submarines. And the idea is to fill those submarines like the Block 5 Virginia. That's going to be a VLS nightmare. Imagine a Ticonderoga that's just submerged. You know, it's not quite that many, but it's pretty close. So they're going to put a ton of VLS on the Block 5 Virginia and make a bunch of those and send them all over the globe. So we have VLS everywhere. Country gets out of hand, couple tomahawks, problem solved. That's the idea behind alternative 2. Alternative 3 is the wish list. It's everything and the kitchen sink. It's like, listen, Congress, we can have a 370 ship Navy. We certainly can. If you write us a blank check, it's going to be billions. We might start getting into that T word trillions eventually. But if you want to do alternative 3, we'll build all the aircraft carriers we can, all the submarines, frigates, destroyers. We're going to have 370 combat ready ships if you want to write us that check. And that's obviously the least likely to happen. So those are the differences between the 3 alternatives. Surface ship focus, submarine focus, and everything focus. That's the 3rd one. And we'll see which one they go with right now. Now, as you can see, for the next 10 years or so, all three plans are pretty much hammered out, because that's how much lead time you need on designing these ships, planning the shipyard availability, start construction, working around maintenance and emerging maintenance and stuff like that. And so for the next 8 or 10 years, nothing's really going to diverge until around 2032, 2033. All right. So let's take a look at the shipbuilding cost and why this is so expensive. This is from the CBO report. That's Congressional Budget Office report. It's supposed to be unpartisan or nonpartisan, whatever. The point is, we are way over budget on every single freaking shipbuilding project. The Navy, whenever they testify before Congress about cost, always lowballs the number by millions, tens of millions, in this case, hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases. So I want to point out, and I'm in the way of this one here, this oiler. This is the John Lewis class oiler, is 38% over budget as a project. And that's one of the newest projects. They just started building that a couple of years ago, and it's 38% over budget already. All of the programs are over at some point. You can see it ranges from 15% all the way up to 38% over budget. My point is, if any company were to run their business this way, they would go bankrupt. You can't have a project that's this big, millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, literally, and be over budget by 38% at the end of the project. And in this case, these projects are ongoing. We're not even done yet, and we're already 38% over in the case of the oiler. So the Navy really needs to get better at estimating cost and being realistic with and honest with the public and Congress, and tell us what this is really going to cost. Also, some of this is the responsibility of the shipyards. The shipyards, I have a little bit of sympathy for, because the Navy, with the LCS anyway, changed the requirements so much over a 15-year period. Of course, that cost got out of control, and that was the Navy's fault, primarily. But whenever a system or a ship is being designed, it's up to the shipyard to say, you approve this design, do not change it. This is what the cost is going to be. That just doesn't happen, though, right? So there's a little bit of blame to go around on both sides, but primarily the Navy is just way out of control whenever it comes to accounting here. And here you can see all of the shipbuilding plans we have above my head here. Every one of them has a cost overrun of between, $10 million to $5.8, billion with a B for the aircraft carriers. It's really expensive. So at the same time, because it was the end of the year, China always publishes its shipbuilding numbers, but they don't do it the way the Navy does, the U.S. Navy. They do it for the entire country. So I don't have the Chinese Navy numbers. I just have the Chinese country shipbuilding numbers here. And I'll tell you what they are. They're staggering is what it is. China, as an industry, as a naval construction shipbuilding, entity, builds 38 million tons of ships every year. That is an insane number of ships. That's a lot of tonnage. When you compare that to the entire country of the United States, including the U.S. military, all the other container ships and Coast Guard ships, and hell, just fishing boats we build out there, we build right around 100,000 tons of ships a year. China's building 38 million. United States building 100,000. Well, we're not even in the same league as China whenever it comes to shipbuilding. And China announced that this year, 2023, which would be last year, they actually increased their shipbuilding orders by 12% to get to 38 million tons. And in 2024, China has already accepted an additional or an increase of 66% of shipbuilding orders over 2023. Now, these numbers are coming out of China. They're to be taken with a grain of salt. I'm sure they're rounding up in their favor. But the fact that we're talking about millions versus hundreds of thousands for the United States, this is not a difference of a rounding era. They are simply in a league of their own whenever it comes to shipbuilding. So why is this important? Why do I even bring this up? We talk about Navy stuff here. Well, this type of industry that you're seeing behind me here reminds me a little bit of the United States in the late 1930s, 1940s. We had a strong industrial base compared to, say, places like Europe after World War I, where there was a lot of damage on that continent. And so when World War II came around, we were in a position to retool a lot of our industry, especially our shipyards, to build ships for things like the Lend-Lease program. And then eventually we got into World War II ourselves, obviously, and built a lot of warships with that. But at the height of World War II, we were building something like a Liberty boat a week. We were pumping them out fast because we had the shipyards and the industrial base to do that. In 2024, that simply isn't the case anymore. While we are investing a lot in ship the new technology industry and infrastructure here in the United States, which is great. Our shipbuilding is lagging behind enormously. And it's beginning to affect the maintenance, by the way, of our submarines. We've said that many times here on this channel. The point is, China could retool if they needed to as well. Just like we did in World War II, China could retool in World War III and begin replacing those ships that end up being sunk and destroyed quite quickly by their adversary. And as their adversary stockpiles run low, whether it's on ammunition or anti-ship cruise missiles and whatnot, they can be pumping out replacement ships much faster than the United States can. I think we build something like 8 to 9 warships on average a year, and they have the industrial capability of building greater than 12 a year. So they could outpace the United States in a long-term war if it came to that. That's looking less likely every day, which is great. But I just want everyone to recognize for a moment, as much crap as we talk about the Chinese Navy, it's called the PLAN, they have a strong industrial foundation. So even though their ships may not be as capable as ours, in my opinion, they can replace them a hell of a lot faster than we can in mass. All right. And while I was reading about China, I stumbled across this page called Asia Times. It's an interesting news site that I'm not that familiar with, but they had a link in a story that led to a white paper. And whenever I start reading white papers, I know I'm reading an engineer or some form of scientist. This is an academic paper, not just a news story. And what this academic paper was talking about was an adjustable radar reflector. And the link to the Asia Times story was this adjustable radar reflector that's been around for a while, apparently, is now being publicly acknowledged by China that they're using this radar reflector on their medium and long-range ballistic missiles. What this radar reflector does is it adjusts in flight, in real time, to make the ballistic missile appear as if it has the radar cross-section of a large civilian aircraft, like a 737 or 747 or some other one that you may know of, or one that's very common for the area. So as this missile's in flight, if a radar operator sees it, the system would recognize the shape and dimensions of the detection as a civilian aircraft. And the idea behind that is to deceive radar operators, obviously, into thinking this ballistic missile, for at least a moment, if not longer, is not a threat. It's an aircraft. If they coupled this, and they're not admitting this part, I'm just saying this would be an idea. If they coupled this ballistic missile with an AIS squawker saying, hey, I'm 737 Beijing to Tokyo, and they have this radar reflector on board that looks like an airplane, that could really cause a delay in response in any kind of air defense commander. And one of the reasons why this is going public is because China wants to use this information as a deterrent, saying that they have this technology, they have this ability, and they intend to use it if they're ever going to use their ballistic missiles in war. They will mask them as if they are civilian air flights. Now, in my opinion, anybody that's an experienced radar operator looking at a ballistic trajectory is going to know right away that that's not an airplane, right? Airplanes don't fly like that. But that moment's hesitation at a war that's being fought at machine speed could be fatal. And that's the point, is to cause deception and deceive. So my question to the chat and the viewers, if you were the commander of an air defense position like you see here, would you engage a ballistic trajectory object that's coming your way, but it's squawking as if it's a civilian airplane, and your radar integration interface is telling you, hey, recommend don't shoot, this looks like a civilian airplane? Would you override that recommendation and hit the fire button to shoot down something that you know is not an airplane, despite two sources telling you that it is, being its radar cross-section and its AIS? So the whole point of this is to cause doubt and delay into these air defense systems. How would you respond to that? And our air defense teams that are being fielded and trained, I'm sure they're already aware, but they need to be aware that this is a tactic that China intends to use. So I look forward to reading your comments and seeing how you would react to that. And before you start clutching your pearls too much, those of you who are wondering, who would use such a tactic? How dare they? That's not honorable. Well, it is actually. Let me introduce you to the miniature air launch decoy. The United States has had this for a long time, but they went public with this capability in 2009. We put these, I know, on the B-52s. I don't know how else they're used. I'm sure there's more than one use for these. And what these do, this air launch decoy goes out and it decoys away from the B-52. And it can do that in all sorts of different ways, including making it look like it's not a B-52, but it's a different type of airplane. Okay. And a bunch of other stuff too. This is a very advanced decoy, very secretive. Just know that it exists and we've used it for years. And so I don't think we use it on ballistic missiles. That's probably worth pointing out. But deception is part of warfare. Don't moralize it is the lesson here. Okay. And let me leave you with this. This is the carrier strike group, Ike. They are in either the Red Sea or the Arabian Gulf. Keep going back and forth between the two. Now that the Gerald R. Ford is coming home, finally, after being extended twice and at sea for 8 months, these guys have the watch. And so I wanted to leave you with a short video of what it takes to get the F-18s into the air. Literally thousands of people, both enlisted and officers, working together hard every day to make the ship work properly, to get it in position to keep this American capability off the shores of Yemen and other countries, is the culmination of thousands of people coming together, working as a team on one of the most complex machines ever built to do this, to get that airplane into the air and shoot down a drone and a ballistic missile. It's really quite an achievement. And it's one of the most rewarding things I ever did serving in the Navy. I was on submarines. I was never on an air deck like this. It's exhausting. It's rewarding. I've made relationships and friends that I keep in touch to this day. Some 20 years later. I've almost been out of the Navy as long as I was in the Navy at this point. And it's tough work and rewarding. And so my pitch is, if you're in high school this year and you're getting ready to graduate, you don't know where you're going to go after high school. I was in that case. I joined the Navy because I read a book by Tom Clancy and I thought submarines were cool. It turns out I was right. And so I stayed in for 20. I would say give the Navy a shot. It's an interesting experience. It's life-changing and very rewarding. All right. That's my pitch. And remember, click the link in the description and delete your personal identifiable information online like you're a Seahawk crew chief, man. Get some. Look at that.